Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another chapter. Today is Wednesday, September 1, 11:30 p.m., somewhere in California. Chapter 3 Dream Journey to the South. Guard the mysteries, constantly reveal them. Louis Welch, Theology. Late in the afternoon, a terrible storm came blowing down off the northern plateaus, blowing icy cold drafts through the chinks in the logs. At times, it blew so hard that the crumpled up wads of newspaper wedged in the tiny cracks would squeak and fly into the room. We all wore layers of long johns and ate mostly in silence, each of us feeling both the vulnerability of our little cabin and the closeness and security of our friendship. The tension and strain was enormous, and the proximity of the four of us forced each one's thoughts into more imaginative realms. I was beginning to understand how years of this kind of stress could lead to visions of the dreaded Wendigo. The vision that obsessed the spirit of a person, turning the heart to ice, inspiring him or her to murder a whole villages of people. The Wendigo is that part inside a person that is mad and can turn into cannibalism of another like being or of oneself. I shuddered to think of the depth of pain and settled myself near the stove with my warmly clad feet propped up on the old wooden apple crate. How about some talk of warmer weather? Agnes suggested. I could tell that she too was feeling strained from the unceasing cold. And even if I had wanted to leave, there was no way out. Only with my flights of spirit could I deal with my claustrophobia. I watched Ruby trying to understand her, a proud old woman who held such a great power in her mind, but who had eyes that saw nothing. She always did everything well. Every dish that was cleaned, every blanket that was rolled, was done to perfection. Her movements were always calculated, no doubt from her blindness. But also, I sensed, from her great reverence for life and the universe around her, it was a lesson for me just to watch her go through her day. I wondered at her coyote-like gratefulness and her ability to become the knowledge that she wanted me to learn. If I were too serious, she would catch me off guard by playing the senile old lady for the petulant child. I had never before had the honor to spend this much time so close to her. I was amazed at how separate she remained, always holding her place, and yet I felt so much love for her at the same time. Agnes scooted a chair over across from me, July pulled up a chair on my left, and Ruby pulled up a chair on my right. No matter how well I knew Ruby, her close presence always made me a little nervous. I never knew what she would do next. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, and I could see her smiling to herself as she picked up the moccasin she had been working on and rubbed it with her hands. "Lynn, it's time for a good story," Agnes said, a tray of beds in her lap. She picked up some tiny white ones on the point of a needle and went to work on a pouch. "I agree," Ruby said. "A good story warms the heart," July said. "I want to hear more about the beautiful man in the tree." "I said a good story," Ruby snapped. "She is going to tell us of the time she spent in the Yucatan, where it's warm and sunny. There's so much to tell. Where should I begin?" "How about at the beginning?" snorted Ruby. July giggled. "Okay, imagine my house. A fine rain was falling, and I could see the thread-like drops through my French windows, and I sat in my living room. I was reading the travel section of the Sunday newspaper, noting the bargain flights to Merida, Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula. Agnes had told me about a woman who lived there, who, she said, knew a lot about masks." "What do you mean? Carved masks?" I had asked Agnes. Agnes had said that the woman knew about power masks, and that she had information that predated Mayan civilization. She had piqued my interest, so I had jotted down the woman's name in my notebook with a vague description of the house in a small village where she lived. Agnes had never mentioned the woman again, nor had I thought about the conversation until this moment. I called the airline number in the newspaper advertisement and made a reservation. It made absolutely no sense from a rational perspective. For the next 3 hours, I canceled dinner dates, appointments, autograph parties at bookstores, and all the other activities I had scheduled. The responses ranged from mild disappointment to rebuffs to rage. It wasn't my intention to irk so many people, but I had been working so hard that I felt I deserved the vacation. Good excuse or not, I was going. The flight was uneventful. I rented a car at the airport, and with maps in hand, I drove to the ancient Mayan ruins of Uxmal, and from there to the small village of Llano, which had dirt streets and adobe houses. Using the smattering of Spanish I knew, I asked the boy directions to the home of Zoila Gutierrez. After much gesturing and pointing, I discovered that it was a small adobe house set off from the main village near a small stream. I thanked the boy, who was Zoila's grandson, and drove to the house. The yard was small and well kept. A fetish was tacked in the center of the old wooden door. I knocked. The door opened and Agnes whistled. Elk was standing there with a wide grin on her face. "I was about to give up on you," she said. "I've been expecting you for 3 days. Why didn't you come sooner?" We hugged. I was completely astonished. "Agnes," I said, "I didn't even know I was coming until yesterday afternoon. I was just talking about you with Zoila. Were your ears itching?" I laughed and said, "You're the last person I expected to see outside of Canada." "Oh, you know how it is. We Indians get the itch to smell around. We follow our noses. Come on in. We were just doing your favorite thing, having tea." I followed her through the house and into a beautiful garden surrounded by a wooden coyote fence. Sitting on a hand-hewn bench was an elderly woman dressed in a loose blouse or huipille and a blue wraparound skirt. She wore leather sandals like most other Indian women from the Yucatan. Agnes introduced us. "Didn't I just say Lynn Andrews would knock on the door soon?" Agnes said. "That you did, Agnes," Zoila said with a slight accent looking at me. "We've met before in the north, but you probably don't remember me." I felt an immediate kinship with this remarkable woman. "No, I don't remember. Where?" "It doesn't matter," she said. "I'll go get Lynn some tea," Agnes said, smiling. "And don't let her pester you about masks and Mayan lore." I stood there awkwardly for a moment. "Are you Mayan?" I finally asked. "I am Mayan," she said. And then she added, "But some people say I'm half bobcat." I was about to ask her about the mask when Agnes returned with a gourd cup filled with a slightly bitter herb tea. We all sat down. No one said anything and we sipped our tea. I was still confused by finding Agnes at this house. My mind was racing with dozens of scenarios that could explain how Agnes could possibly be sitting in front of me. Zoila smiled warmly at me. Her eyes were very kind and sweet. But in the shadows, I could see a coiled rattlesnake. I knew I should never cross this woman. Her eyes moved across my face, back and forth, as if she were reading my thoughts. Several small children came running into the backyard, and in a high voice, a girl asked something of Zoila in Mayan. Zoila answered, and the children stood in a ring around us expectantly. Zoila explained that the children wanted Agnes to tell them another story. Agnes spoke to the children in Mayan. Then she spoke to the girl who had spoken to Zoila. The little girl ran inside the house and quickly returned with a teapot. She poured tea in all of our cups. "That one is my granddaughter," Zoila said. "She's certainly pretty," I remarked. Agnes excused herself and sat down nearby on the ground. The children surrounded her in a circle, laughing and crying out excitedly. A hush came over them as soon as Agnes began her narrative. I took the opportunity to say to Zoila, "Agnes said you know about masks. Come over here and sit with me, so we won't disturb the children," she said. We went to the corner of the garden, sat on the ground. The strong aroma of damp earth and subjungle foliage, wet from a late afternoon shower, was rich and fertile. I took another sip of the tea. This vantage point enabled me to see through a break in the coyote fence. In the distance, buzzards covered the branches of a dead tree behind a thatched roof hut. Has something died? Oh no, the buzzards always come and wait for the scraps from the cantina. Zoila regarded me for a moment in silence. With the palms of her hands, she smoothed the surface of the ground. She picked up a thin twig and drew a design in the earth. It was a rectangular section divided into triangles. What does it mean? I asked. It means power, which means a way into understanding yourself. Power. The design has many implications, but how does it mean power? We call this design a mask of the earth. This mask is our altar. This is how we pray and arrange our sacredness. I got my shoulder bag and took out a white shawl that I had brought for her. I presented it with respect. She examined it and set it aside with a nod. Teach me, I said. You have been attracted here as a bee is to blossom. One of the reasons you are here is to learn. I will teach you. This evening, you must rest from your log yearning. We must siesta now and wait for knowledge. When you are ready to receive her, knowledge will arrive. She is a wanderer, but never so far away you cannot entice her into your presence. As Zoila spoke, a beautiful green hummingbird flew between us and explored a fuchsia bush. Zoila continued nodding toward our guest. Watch how the hummingbird hovers in front of the flower. Pollen is power to that tiny bird. See, she waits until just the right moment and then joins with it. She takes what she needs and flies away. Practically on cue. The hummingbird moved backward from the fuchsia flower and sped off above the coyote fence. When power comes to you, be still with her. Don't discuss it and bleed the energy away. Just hold it. Slowly, she will begin to dance with you, but only if you are patient and listen for her voice. Zoila took both my hands and touched them to her heart. My own heart swelled. We stood up and went over to Agnes and the children. She was still telling her story, and the children were gazing at her with rapt attentiveness. The story must have been funny because the children laughed delightfully at various points. I remember that July had once told me that Agnes spoke 10 Indian languages. Agnes dismissed the children, and they all scampered away. The children in their bright clothing of red, yellow, and black made a charming picture as they ran out of the coyote fence. The three of us walked to where my red Ford was parked. I had rented it only a few hours earlier, but it seemed like days had passed. I'll take Lynn with me, and we'll see you later, Agnes said. I'll be there, Zoila said. Agnes pressed something small into Zoila's hand and winked at her. We drove down a twisting dirt road that skirted the verdant jungle, Agnes pointing and giving directions. Where are we going? I asked. We are going to visit some friends. There we can rest and eat. By now, I was driving through low jungle on a narrow 2-lane road. I sensed we were near the ancient ruins at Uxmal. I thought about Zoila, and I was filled with nervous anticipation at the thought of learning from her. The road seemed to be getting narrower, and the tangled vines and flowers were within touching distance from the car window. How much further? I asked. Not far, Agnes answered. A slight rain was beginning, a fine mist. Beads of water gathered on the windshield, and I switched on the wipers. The road was damp and more dangerous. All I needed was to get stuck in a quagmire in the middle of the jungle. The road cut east and came to a clearing. Moments later, we were in the courtyard of a long adobe hacienda. Park there, Agnes said. I noticed that many other cars, jeeps, a camper, and a pickup were parked there in a row. The rain stopped just as we got out of the car. Bring your things, Agnes said. I got the 2 bags I brought and followed her. The hacienda was surrounded by a glade of jacaranda trees. Gray flowering vines hung over the balconies, and our feet slipped on the highly polished tiles as we entered a wide, hand-hewn mahogany door. What is this place, Agnes? You are welcome here, as am I. That's all you need to know for now. She came to a stop. I think you will find your stay here more than you bargained for. I smiled at the sly gleams in Agnes' eyes. She turned right and we passed some high-ceilinged, open-air rooms. Outside the rain began to pelt down. The staccato sound of the large drops blunted the dense birds and insect sounds of the Yucatan. Agnes led on. We went up some stairs to a large room on the second floor. 2 beds were in the room, and a row of narrow windows overlooked a courtyard that had a small swimming pool surrounded by squat palm trees. A few women sat on wooden chairs on the veranda, watching the rain and sipping pink drinks in tall glass with straws. I put my bag down and opened the horizontal wood shutters. The lulling, slapping sound of the rain was pleasant and made me drowsy. I wanted a bath and a nap. Agnes had already fallen on her bed and had turned her face into the pillow. Her rhythmic breathing told me she was sound asleep. After my bath, I lay down with a great relief on the small, hard bed and watched the fan slowly turning above me. But exhaustion didn't prevent my heart from pounding with excitement, and I was unable to close my eyes. I dressed and quietly left the room. Outside on the portal, I sat in a lounge chair and watched the silvery strikes of rain fall steadily. In the distance, to the east, lightning split the sky. The woman I had seen had vanished, and no one was around. I assumed everybody was taking a siesta. I felt as if I were in the navel of an ancient civilization. The energy of the Yucatan felt naked, as if thousands of years of life had worn away the usual veils a country wears to protect itself. It seemed as if the Yucatan stood nude before me. Her jungle and rain and foliage weren't hiding from me. She pulsed and stretched out in all directions, flat yet muscular, powerful yet subtle in her strength. She met me in the heart and solar plexus. Breath for breath, movement for movement, I was in a great power spot. And all the while I watched, a sea of rain shimmered over the land. I dozed off and was awakened by Agnes shaking my shoulder. Zoila was with her, both of them dressed festively. The rain had stopped, and the hour was late. Colorful lights lit up the patio, and I could hear women laughing somewhere off in the shadows. "Is Lynn always sleeping, Agnes?" Zoila asked, lifting a dark eyebrow and peering at me. If the question hadn't come from a medicine woman, it would have seemed harmless, but it sounded like a challenge to me, like something Ruby might say. My back stiffened, and I forced myself awake. "I hope you're hungry," Agnes said. "Yes, very," I answered. Agnes rubbed my back and giggled at me on the way downstairs. She elbowed me like a schoolgirl. "Relax," she whispered in my ear. "You're too sensitive." "What is this play, Agnes? Is it some kind of retreat?" "I believe this is a dining room." And so it was. A large room with 11 tables and young Mayan women in white flowered dresses serving dinner. There were 9 women still eating or having coffee. The 3 of us sat down and a young woman brought us all salads, platters of fish, bowls of black beans and rice, and dishes of ripe bananas and tropical fruit. After we ate, Zoila asked me to go for a walk with her in the garden. Agnes returned to the room. A balmy perfume was in the air, and the grounds were full of tropical palms and flowering vines. Zoila took my hand and walked me in the directions of the stairs. She said nothing. The sounds of the female voices seemed to fade, and the night noises began to magnify and crescendo. When she let go of my hand, the chatter of voices returned, louder than the night voices. "Did you hear that?" I asked, wide-eyed. Zoila looked at me. "What? The night?" "No, the leaves," she interrupted. "The leaves? Yes, they spoke to you." Zoila held up her palms to me. "I work with the plants. I use them to heal. I go out at night for various sacred herbs during a certain phases of the moon." She took my hand again. It felt hot. She squeezed my hand and then released it. "Listen," she said. "Close your eyes." I could hear a shift in the sounds, a very faint wailing. I jumped a little and spun around on one foot in a short dance. I came close to falling and then opened my eyes. The rubber plants loomed over me and the earth undulated in heat waves. I sat down on the ground and stared up at Zoila. Don't be frightened. Within each of us there is a being that we must come to know. That spirit in you talks to the plant spirits. I felt giddy. Have you never noticed? I have always loved the wind in the trees. Close your eyes again and listen with your heart. I did so and heard a soft wailing, almost like a woman crying. Zoila touched my shoulder. Open your eyes now. You heard her, didn't you? Yes. Who is she? She is Ashana. I call her the monkey root in your tongue. She is a plant and she offers her protection to you. You need her. Why do you call her monkey root? She is telling you how she sees you, like monkeys often do when they imitate people. She is very powerful. When you come to stay with me, we will go out and find her together. Zoila gave me a wide grin, turned, and disappeared into the night shadows. I reoriented myself. The hacienda seemed deserted. I walked quickly upstairs to the room and found Agnes sound asleep. I couldn't imagine how she could fall asleep so quickly and easily in this remarkable place. I looked at the clock. It was 2 in the morning. I had been with Zoila for 5 hours, but it had seemed like only a few minutes. The next morning, I awoke feeling tired. I laid in bed listening to the rain and the din of birds and insects at the dense foliage all around the hacienda. Agnes, come out of the bathroom. I can't get used to all the civilized living. She indicated the bathroom. It's not right. She came and sat on the edge of my bed. Agnes, I had an incredible experience with Zoila last night. My tiredness disappeared as I spoke. Tell me. We were walking in the garden. We stopped to listen, and I heard the leaves speaking to me. Also, a root called Ashana called to me. She sounded like a woman crying. Ashana, I've heard of her. She keeps away evil spirits. I know a little about that. I should have known that you knew about this plant. Yes, well, Zoila will be a good teacher for you. She knows the sacred plants of this circle better than anyone. It thrilled me to hear the sound from the leaves. Zoila helped me. The sounds took me and I danced. Agnes, watching me as I bounced excitedly out of the bed and got dressed, said, In the old days, we always sent an apprentice to another medicine person if she needed to learn powers that were from a different path. Zoila is extremely knowledgeable about plants, but her knowledge is from a different path. I honor her, and I give you to her to learn some of that wisdom. I like Zoila, I remarked on the way downstairs. Agnes and I ate breakfast in the small dining room, and then walked over to the ruins of Uxmal. We meandered with delight through the ancient city. Uxmal has a voluptuous female quality. We would find the magnetic spots in the architectural design that were like acupressure points on a human body and stand on them, breathing in the energy through the soles of our feet. In the afternoon, we walked back to the hacienda to take a siesta. I was very aware of my intense love and respect for Agnes as my friend and my teacher. I was also very aware of the similarity in the energy between us, reflected back to us by the Yucatan. We were discovering the magical sights, smells, sounds, and culture of Uxmal together. We were both strangers in this foreign land, and for the first time we were equal, enjoying the experience of something new, or so I thought. Agnes left the room after our siesta. While she was gone, Zoila's grandson, the one who had given me directions in the village, delivered a note. It said Agnes would not return for dinner, and to wait until the moon was up before following the map on the note. Thank you guys so very much for tuning in with me. I highly appreciate those who stay till the end, and wherever you guys at, I hope the light of the divine shines upon you guys. Blessings And this was a production from Tepochtli. Goodbye.